on my finger there. The Mishnah continues its discussion about the use of property that was stolen by another. One may not take change from the coins in the customs collector's box, nor from the coins in the tax collector's purse, nor one may take charity from, nor may one take charity from them, but one may take from the coins the collector has in his house, or from the coins he carries in the street.
Right. Okay. So what's this thing about you can't take change from the coins in the custom collector's box or from the coins in the tax collector's purse? So, guys, what we are talking about here is it's a box. It's like a lockable safe in which the collector of duties would deposit his takings. So if a Jew wants to change his coins of a larger denomination, say, for example, he has notes and he wants smaller denominations in exchange, so that he can use it for different purposes. He's not allowed to, even with the tax collector's permission. Why? Because the reason that they prohibited for use is that, according to Rashi, they were stolen. So we're going to say, well, what do you mean taxes were stolen? Only in a country like South Africa, we generally know that when you pay taxes, it will never go towards improvement of infrastructure, as we said, nor for the aged and infirm. And you can work for your entire life for the country and pay taxes, and you'll never be looked after in your old age. There will not be a high level of education, which is why anybody with a little bit of money pays for private schooling, nor a proper infrastructure of a public healthcare system, which is why people that go to the Johannesburg Jail for treatment, if they don't die from neglect, they can die from disease within being in a public hospital that is crawling with rats and disease. So what are we talking about in this particular case? So there's a huge question as far as changing large denominations of notes for smaller coins, that there's something inherently stolen about this tax collection money. So there's two types of taxes. There's taxes amongst the populace, and there's what you call taxes for between ports. You've got custom tax, but between countries as well as internal taxes. So if the people who gave the money to the collector in the first place know that the money was taken from them by force, and they haven't despaired of retrieving it, hopefully because the government itself or the king is not corrupt, and the person collecting it was a bit of a thug and took more than he was supposed to, for example, and they haven't despaired of the collector being caught out, then Yu'ush has not taken place. So taking the coins from the collector's box would be itself considered theft, because the money still belongs to the victims. Now, let's just say that they had despaired. The king itself is as corrupt as the tax collectors. He has no intention of refunding the populace, in which case a third party who takes the money from the collector's box would technically acquired by dint of Yu'ush, which means that you spare this concept of despair of retrieving it, as well as a change of domain. It left the house of the victim and is now in the collection box of the tax thugs on behalf of the king. So the Mishnah still forbids accepting these coins as change, because according to Rashi, it's repugnant to take money from a box that is designated for stolen property. Okay. Now, there's also tax that we have in terms of, like, for example, in South Africa, that you pay taxes on what you earn. You also pay taxes on what you buy. You tax to death. There's also custom collector's tax as far as that's concerned. Now, what happens when we read on the Mishnah, as Arthur was reading, about this case of that you can't take charity? Well, what if a person needs charity? Okay, what happens if somebody needs charity? So in that particular case, even even if a person needs charity, he cannot take it from stolen money. He has to go to the gemach or community fund, and the community will take care of him, but he can't be part of the problem. But one may take coins from the collector has in his house, or coins that he carries in the street, meaning in his personal capacity, although the tax collector is quite wicked, it's one step removed from the stolen money. It's money that he's in fact siphoned for himself. So it's between two individuals. Why you would want to get coins exchanged from a local thug and his henchman instead of the shopping center or the Macaulay or the shop down the road, I don't know. That is just specifying in case that need arose. In an individual capacity, it's not as much of it's not a problem. If it's from communal coffers of tax that is being taken immorally, that's a problem. So we're going to be dealing with an issue now. What's the difference between the law of the land of what is legal and what is moral? Sometimes what is illegal is immoral, and sometimes that which is illegal is not immoral. And this is where the discernment is going to take place. Now, just in case we run out of time, I would like Kevin to share his idea now. We'll go back in a minute.
So, thank you. This week's Parsha is Parshat Lech Lecha, and it's also very topical about what's happening now. So it discusses, one of the things it discusses is Avraham and Sarah couldn't have a child for many years. In this parsha, Hashem said they're going to have a child, but so Sarah said to Avram, take Hagar, her maidservant, and have a child with her. So he has a child, and the child's name's Ishmael. And then I just thought of this idea, not just before the shir. And then Hashem told Avram that he must banish Hagar from his home, because Hagar was taunting Sarah and teasing her that she didn't have a child. And this goes to Hakarat Hatov. And I don't know if I've experienced this with some people, present company excluded, many present companies excluded, where you've helped somebody and you've done the chesed for them, and they like stab you in the back, they like treat you like garbage, it's like really being nasty to someone after they've been done good for you. And this is a lesson I just thought of actually a few minutes ago, that if someone does something good for us, we need to always remember and appreciate that, and always be cognizant and not quickly forget that someone did good for us.
Good. I think that's a very good point. Just to add, Kevin, on this Pasha Lech Lecha, Margaret Kaplan mentioned to me on Saturday night, because I'll tell you something, she gives a shir which Anne Steinhauer goes to.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I want to give the other thing tomorrow about the other part of it, about Ishmael. You want to say that?
No, I don't want to say that. I'm saying
I'll do that tomorrow. Okay.
I'm saying that this week's Pasha talks about captives. And it's very pertinent where Hashem, in his genius and kindness, tells us about captives at a very auspicious time. And last week about the destruction of Hamas at a very auspicious time. Hashem is sending messages to us to know that he's looking after us. Obviously, he was not happy with the infighting with Klal Yisrael, and it took an external force to unify us. But Hashem, still in his mercy, has given us hints within the Pasha, and the probability is so low, 1 in 54, that it could be spoken about the exact relevant topic when we needed it most. That's all I wanted to say. Okay, let's get back to the Gemara share. Kevin, thank you for teaching us. I think that thing on Karis Hatov is a big deal. And so Arthur made that Mishnah bring you divine protection. Thank God Kevin is here as our friend too. Now, the Gemara speaks about a brisa, and it says that the brisa that we have modifies the Mishnah's prohibition against taking change from a custom collector's box. So a Tana taught in a brisa, but one who must pay himself half a dinar may give him a whole dinar instead, and the collector gives him the change in coins of smaller denomination. Okay? So what does this actually mean? Is that if you've got to pay half a dinar of taxes in prutos, now remember prutos is the smallest denomination, and there's not enough putters. He can say, look, I've got a dinner for you, but just give me a change, and then I'm paying the right amount of taxes by getting change. And the reason why, according to the brisa, that's allowed in this case is it's not some random oak trying to get change for larger note denominations for smaller coin denominations, as an example. It's for somebody that has to pay taxes. If he doesn't get the right change, he's going to suffer a loss. So this seems to be a brisa that contradicts our Mishnah. Okay? Now, there is a caveat here that says this is even the brisa here, guys, speaks of a case in which there's a possibility that some of the money in the collector's box is correct. Okay? But if you know with certainty it's all stolen, you cannot, if you're paying taxes, ask for any change. Now we say, well, why pay taxes? Because obviously the person that's collecting the taxes probably has permission from the king, but he's a mafioso or a thug, that it's him and 10 associates that are willing to crease one's skull with a bat or a ball and chain if he doesn't get the right money. And you can be rest assured that the king is not going to get all of that money. The king might get half. But the king's happy to get anything because he cannot be in all places in all constituents' homes at all given times. So you say, well, what about the army? Or what about the king's royal guards, etc., etc.? So we say that thugs don't necessarily have to be a third party hired to collect taxes. Sometimes the third party could be, in fact, officers that work for the king on a military basis, and they simply ask for more taxes than necessary, and they look after themselves only too well. Okay? So we're saying it could be that. It could be in certain times in the Middle Ages that there were papal collectors. So the church would collect money. Only some of the money would go to the king. The church would keep the rest. And if you decided not to give, they would simply like have a roasted fire underneath, and they'd turn you around like a chicken on a spit. And once your skin shriveled up and you were screaming and they threw oil on you, you would pay. So it wasn't exactly by choice. So we're saying in the case where you would sustain a loss, you could get the money back in taxes. However, that's on the possibility that some of the money is stolen. But if it were known with certainty that all the money was stolen, you couldn't do that. We're obviously not talking about pekuach nefesh when somebody comes to you and says, pay your taxes or we'll hurt you. We're saying in a case where you know that you have to pay taxes and you know that all the money is stolen. You pay your taxes because you don't want to get hurt, but you do not ask for change because it is repugnant, according to Rashi, to ask for change. So how does the brisa differ from the Mishnah? Firstly, you're entitled to the change, and there's a doubt as to whether all the money is stolen. So when could there be a doubt? If you suspect that the tax collectors are asking more than the king's tax percentage, and that he's keeping some of it. So some of the money is legitimately collected for the king, and some is not. So that might add a certain amount of doubt as a suffix. Okay. Now, so that's how we deal with the brisa. So the whole thing is that the Gemara finds difficulty with the Mishnah's premise that the money taken by customs collectors is stolen, because it says, okay, you want to assume that. You're assuming that is the default position. But how can the money taken by the custom collectors, let's use the word tax collectors here, be considered stolen? While Shmuel has said the law of the kingdom is the law. According to this principle, the authority of a customs or tax collector, which was granted to him by the king, should be recognized under Jewish law. Okay. So in other words, what is the law of the kingdom is the law. So the Torah accords a Jewish or Gentile king the right to impose laws on his people, including the assessment of taxes. So the laws of the land are valid under halacha, and a Jew has a religious duty to observe them. Now, according to most authorities, the principle isn't just rabbinic. It actually is derisa, biblical law. So given that the king, Jewish or non-Jewish, has a halachic right to levy taxes, he's fully entitled to the payments he receives, and they become his property. So consequently, one who evades payment of taxes transgresses the biblical prohibition of theft, since he thereby keeps the property of another for himself. So, how do we get out of this then? I mean, what's the story? So although it's generally, guys, agreed that the principle of the law is the kingdom of the law, meaning whatever is the law of the country, that should be the halachic law, providing it doesn't contradict halacha, and it has the status of derisa, biblical law. The Rishonim disagree as to its source. So you've got some Rishonim who understand the basis of this rule to be that all the citizens of a country voluntarily accept to obey the king's edicts. And since that is the case, it assumes the status of binding law. And that's in Bava Basra 54b. But that approach reflects the right and duty of every society to regulate itself. And that's a Noahide law, that you shall not have anarchy and set up systems of law. And it's accomplished by appointing communal leaders to enact laws for the public good. So therefore, the laws they pass are binding on all the members and citizens of the country, even against their will. Why? Because nobody wants to pay taxes. Everybody wants to keep all the money for themselves. So some Rishonim maintain that it's a principle of the law of the kingdom is the law, stems from a different facet, and that is that the land actually belongs to the king. So he is entitled to banish whom he pleases, or to tax those who live there by sufferance. And I mean the word sufferance literally, is that if they get booted out of the country, who knows if they're going to land up in servitude somewhere else or killed, etc. So many cases, the poor and impoverished suffered at the hands of the landlords. But still, just as any landowner is entitled to charge tenants for the privilege of dwelling on his land, since the king owns all the land, he's entitled to do so. But it has a slightly different halachic implication, because accordingly, this principle wouldn't apply with respect to a Jewish king in Eretz Israel, because every Jew has a share and inalienable right to dwell in Eretz Israel. Other Rishonim say that that principle holds even to a Jewish king in Eretz Israel, because he was elected there by divine will. But according to all opinions, a non-Jewish king certainly can, in a non-Jewish land, tax the citizens there. So even those Rishonim who hold that a Jewish king is not empowered to impose laws in Eretz Israel that he's entitled to at the cost of all of Eretz Israel, has the land, and the other Jews do not have an ownership of Eretz Israel, which is really problematic philosophically. They would all agree that the limitation applies only to laws intended for the king's own benefit. But laws intended for the public good are binding. In other words, what we're saying is this, is that forget about the rule that it's the king's property or a landlord's property and the tenant has to pay. If we say every Jew is entitled to Eretz Israel, that law doesn't apply. But there is a law saying that if you want to build communal infrastructure and courts of law and have due process, everybody has to contribute to the state. That law is binding with the Jewish king or not Jewish king. So how is it that you can evade taxes? So the Gemara answers, Rav Chanina bar Kahana said in the name of Shmuel, the Mishnah refers to customs collectors, in other words, the customs between two ports, or tax collectors who have no limit to the amount they collect. So what we are saying is that, well, let me just give you the premise, is that this is saying that the person can take as much as he pleases. Because, as I said to you earlier on, it's common for kings to obtain their revenues by selling the privilege of collecting taxes. If they had a small army, then the army was there to protect the country in wars against fighting insurgents from bordering countries, and they didn't want those officers to be thinned out by collecting the money internally and leaving the borders vulnerable. So what they would do is they would hire individuals who were thugs to collect the taxes on behalf of the king. Now, you had certain people that were legitimate and more of a legal nature that could do so, and some that were a little bit questionable. So, in other words, an individual would pay the king a fixed sum of money in exchange for the right to tax the populace, and he'd keep the payments for himself. That's what the Gemara says, well, the commentaries. Since the king himself has actually the authority to levy taxes, halachically, he also has an authority, because he has appointed an agent to collect on his behalf, or he sold the right to another, and therefore the collector is fully entitled to the payments. So then why does the Mishnah rule that his takings must be treated as stolen property? And this is what we're getting to now, is that according to Rav Chanina Bar Kahana, who said in the name of Shmuel, it's a tax collector who has no limits on the amount of taxes he collects, meaning he takes as much as he pleases. You're dealing with a weak king here. The king didn't assess a standard fee for each type of merchandise. So if the king said, look, certain grains have this tax, you can add on a certain percentile, and we're having a little bit of intelligence that basic food products for the poor are taxed at a lower level than luxury goods. And if it isn't the case where the king says, well, just pay me a stipend and you can keep everything you collect, and there's some sort of structure and discipline behind that about what the tax collector can add as an agent of the king, then it's a slightly different story. But if it's not regulated well, it's an inequitable division of taxes, and that's considered not legitimate. Okay, so that's one of the issues that you have to contend with. Alternatively, you're dealing with a collector who levies more tax than the king actually wanted him to, and therefore the entire collection is considered unlawful. Why? Because if the collector broke his agreement with the king, he doesn't enjoy the authority or the agency of being a part of the law of the kingdom. In other words, there's no obligation to even pay him the authorized amount, and everything he collects is deemed to be stolen property. So you might say, well, why? Because only a certain percentage is stolen and the rest, a certain percentage is legitimate and the rest is stolen. So what we are saying is that if I'm hiring you as an agent to fulfill a task for me, and you go rogue and you do your own thing, then I no longer want to be responsible to have you as my agent, because you're not fulfilling my instruction. And therefore, any deviation from the instruction means that I haven't given you permission at all future to act on my behalf, because I have no idea in terms of your level of unpredictability. So I'll give you an example. You open up a dealership of a BMW car dealership, not to sell BMWs, but to repair BMWs. And what happens is you either charge more than the standard tariff for BMW parts, or alternatively, you start to also sell pirate parts, not as legitimate, but pirate parts as an alternative. Now, as an agreement with the BMW dealership, as far as panel beating and mechanical and auto electrical parts are concerned, you have a mandate to stick within a certain pricing structure, so that you can rest assured as the customer that no matter which branch you go to, there's a uniform pricing structure for that particular part number. And if it deviates, it sullies the reputation of BMW. and therefore BMW wants nothing to do with you. So, which means if I buy parts from a dealership that is no longer enjoys the protection of a BMW warranty, I do not want to buy any more parts from that dealership, because I'm not going to get the warranty backup that I need. And the reason why the warranty is not given is the dealership is being subversive and operating with both an alternative of pirate parts or not adhering to the policies of a BMW repair shop agent or agency. Am I making sense, guys? So therefore, it's not a legitimate agency anymore. If you're not adhering to the regulations, you lose the privilege and the reputation of being part of the BMW group. Am I making sense, guys? Yes or no?
100%.
Okay, so because that refutes the argument, well, some of the money is legitimately the king's and some is not. Some are not, which would contradict the Brisa, because the Brisa is saying, well, some's legit, some is not. So therefore you can get denominations back on taxes on the legit money. It's not legitimate if the king is uncomfortable with the arrangement because you're no longer deserving of being an agent of the king. So an alternative answer in the Academy of Rav Yanai, who said the Mishnah refers to a tax or customs collector who appointed himself without the authority of a king. I mean, that's clearly prohibited. But in the first case, it's still lack of adherence to the king's protocol, to which he certainly doesn't feel comfortable with you working at the king's behest anymore, means you lose the legitimacy of being an extended agent of. Okay. So, the Gemara notes that this discussion is being recorded in a slightly different context, and there are those who teach it in reference to a slightly different Mishnah, guys. Okay, there's a Mishnah in Kalayim, chapter 9, verse 2, not just in Bava Kamma, and it says, one may not wear Kalayim even on top of 10 garments in order to evade the customs with it. Okay, so I need to give you some background here just to give you a bit of a sense of what it is. Now, I know Arthur's writing, but just for the benefit, I'm just going to repeat what Kalayim actually is. So Kalayim is, it's so strange, is because you often hear throughout the world that people know what kosher is. And part of kashrut is you cannot mix meat and milk. But I must be honest with you, growing up in South Africa, there wasn't much emphasis, even when we became Bolshevas, as far as kashrut and not mixing meat and dairy, as far as mixing wool and linen, wool and linen, which is Kalayim. And it comes down to that parsha where we learned in Bereshit about Cain and Abel, and the source of the conflict was according to their respective sacrifices that they made, and that's the source. But it is apparently as important as kashrut. And where's this prohibition of wearing shatnez, the combination of linen and wool being spun, woven, or sewn together? It's in Leviticus Vayikra, chapter 19, verse 19. It's in Deuteronomy Devarim, chapter 22, verse 11. And it's in the Gemara and Mishnahs of Kilayim. So there's certain things that you cannot mix together. You cannot grow certain you can't grow certain produce together, such as grains and grape, and you can't wear wool and linen together. So we're saying, okay, so what's this thing about piling 10 layers? What are we talking about? One may not wear Kalayim even on top of 10 garments in order to evade paying customs with it. Okay, so first thing I've got to do is give you a little bit of background. Is that the customs duties between different provinces or between different states or countries were only levied on a merchant's goods, but not on his personal effects, such as the clothes that he's wearing. It's kind of like when you go to the airport and they say you've got a certain limitation on how many kilograms of bags you can take. no, 23 kilogram bags. So what I do when I'm going to Israel, I'm leaving the heat of summer in Johannesburg, and I'm going to Israel in the icy part of the winter. And I've hit my quota of clothes, but I want to leave clothes in Eretz Israel. So what I do, I pack on 5 layers, because they're not going to weigh me. Because they're not going to weigh me and take into account that kilogram usage, because they're not in the bags. I'm wearing it on my person. So here, what you wear on your person, you're not taxed with, but what you are transporting, you are. Now, guys, that wouldn't fly today, because people would keep diamonds in their pockets and all sorts of things. But apparently we're dealing with the more magical, trustworthy time. So, Kevin, you're nodding a little bit. I don't blame you. Might not be the most interesting person, but the Gemara is. I hope I'm giving it over okay. So, customs were levied only on a merchant's goods, not in his personal effects, such as the clothing he is wearing. So, guys, it's therefore possible to avoid paying the customs on a particular garment by wearing it. So we say, look, sometimes there's a tax between the citizens of a country, and sometimes the non-Jewish nations, if you were a citizen, would pay extra taxes because you were a Jew. So if a Jew were to wear a garment of kilayim and he disguised himself as a Gentile, there's certain opinions that he wouldn't be charged at all. So in other words, the reason you're forbidden to wear kilayim is that the intent is to enjoy the benefit of clothing. What do you mean enjoy the benefit of clothing? To keep warm. But if your intent is something different, in other words, to avoid customs, and not the protection of the elements, as well, clothing is generally worn, that's known as wearing it with a slightly different, you're not getting direct benefit, you're getting inadvertent benefit. So according to some rabbinic opinions, that form of kilayim is allowed to avoid that sort of tax you'd pay as a Jew if you look like a non-Jew and wore kilayim. Others say that if you were going to pay tax on that garment, you could wear it not because you're getting benefit, but if you have 9 other layers of clothing underneath, and that was your 10th layer, then basically you're not getting any sort of comfort benefiting of keeping you warm. It would just be to avoid the taxes, which indirectly, if you're not receiving that direct protection from the elements, it's okay. Okay, so that's what we're talking about now, that you can avoid customs with it. So what does this have to do with tax collectors? Let me just go through it quickly. So the Gemara remarks the Mishnah doesn't accord with Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva taught in a brisa it's forbidden to wear kilayim to evade customs, but Rav Shimon said in the name of Rabbi Akiva it is permitted to wear kilayim to evade customs. I'm going to go through what that means now. But the Gemara is analyzing it and it's looking at the wording, and it basically said that the opinions are understandable regarding the issue of wearing kilayim without intent to enjoy the benefit of the clothing, because all the Tanaim agree that you cannot wear kilayim for the benefit of clothing. But this is where they disagree over the following point, because one master, Rabbi Akiva, holds that something that is unintended is permitted, meaning that you're not getting benefit, but the permission is for tax evasion. But as long as you're not getting the benefit for direct wearing, it's okay. Whereas the other master holds that something is unintended is forbidden, which basically means that even if it has, well, that's in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda, is that even if the act is permissible because you're not wearing the kilayim in order to derive benefit of warmth, etc., and it's a secondary indirect benefit of avoiding taxes, you can't do something that if the other clothing disappeared, that would still be prohibited. And it's only under laws of going the extra mile that you're avoiding what is initially prohibited. So what does this actually mean? It means, therefore, that the dispute concerns only a matter of kilayim. In other words, can you get an indirect benefit from kilayim or can't you? As far as evading taxes are concerned, both sides agree is permitted. You can do it. But you see, the question arises again, how can you be allowed to evade tax or customs issues with a garment when Shmuel said the law of the kingdom is the law, meaning there's a biblical enforcement of civil law and it's derisa. How could Rabbi Akiva or Rav Yehuda both be in agreement that to evade taxes is fine, when it seems biblically that it's prohibited? And the answer is given again by Rabbi Chanina Bava Kamma, who said in the name of Shmuel, the reference is to customs or tax collector who has no limit to the amount he collects, meaning he's lost the authority of the king because he's being punitive and the king was not expecting to collect that amount. This guy's taking advantage. And therefore, all the amount that he's trying to collect is considered stolen. He's lost the authority of the king because he's not doing the king's wishes. And in the Academy of Rav Yanai, they said that this refers to a customs collector who appointed himself without the authority of the king. So if it was legitimately sanctioned by the king, the collection of taxes, it's audited well, it's reasonable, everybody agrees to it, it's not, you would have to pay taxes, and then you can't evade taxes on that basis. Even Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda would agree. So again, their discussion was only that when a person performs a permissible act that might cause a second forbidden act to take place, the second act is something that is unintended, but it still means that according to Rabbi Akiva, even if the second act is allowed, but the first act under normal circumstances would be prohibited, it's no good. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda is saying, Rabbi Akiva is saying that the second act is permitted, in other words, to avoid taxes, but you're not actually wearing it. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, listen, if you, even if you're not getting the benefit of wearing it, you're still wearing it, basically. So both agree that in terms of avoiding taxes that are illegal, you can do it. But Rabbi Akiva is just saying, if you're not getting any intended warmth or benefit of clothing, you can wear it as a 10th layer. And Rabbi Yehuda is saying, even if you're not getting the benefit of the clothing for which kalaim is worn, you still can't use it because it's still not ideal. All right, guys, I've given the share. I hope you're happy.
Yeah, I'm happy. I want to ask you a quick question. Sorry, I got 1 minute, which is great. Is there anything inside there that talks about where you can evade taxes if the money collected, even though it's the correct amount, let's say it's 40% and you collect 40%, if it's used inappropriately, if it's misappropriated on the other end, like we have in South Africa?
Gavin, I've got no source for it. I had a discussion with Rav Simcha. Years ago, Rav Simcha seemed to imply it's not allowed. And I think with the fatigue of what he's seen in the country in terms of corruption, when I mentioned it last time in his house, he never argued with me at all. And I don't know if he agrees with me now, having seen it, or he just didn't want to argue with me. I'm not sure. But I feel clean and conscious, personally, to not pay when it's not being used for the benefit of South Africa. Unequivocal.
Yeah, so that's
no issue.
So
I'll give it to Tzedakah.
with,
Tzedakah gets it.
yeah,
If you feel bad, give it to Tzedakah. Use that money to help Jews. That's it.
Yeah.
Have a good day.